My name is Serena Voss, and I'm 32 years old. For a long time, I thought the hardest thing I'd ever do was leave. I was wrong. The hardest thing was standing still while my own family tried to dismantle everything I built after I did. It was a Wednesday morning in October when the envelope arrived. I remember because I'd just made coffee, the good kind, not the instant stuff I survived on for years, and I was standing at my kitchen window watching the neighbor's dog chase squirrels across the lawn. Normal morning. Quiet. Then the knock. The man at the door didn't smile. He handed me a thick envelope with a county court return address and walked away before I could say a word. I stood there in my socks on the cold hardwood, coffee going warm in my hand, and opened it right there in the doorway. Family court. Petition for guardianship. My brother and my mother listed as co-petitioners. I read it twice, then a third time. The words rearranged themselves, but never changed. They were claiming I was financially incompetent, that my assets, whatever they believed those to be, were at risk of mismanagement, that I had isolated myself from family support systems, that I needed to be protected from my own decisions. My brother's signature was at the bottom, bold, unhurried, like he'd signed it the same way he signed birthday cards. I sat down on the front step in the cold and I didn't cry. I just felt something harden in my chest, slow and certain, like concrete setting. But to understand how we got there, I have to take you back to Knoxville, Tennessee, where I grew up in a house that always smelled like my mother's candles and my father's expectations. My father, Robert Voss, built a regional trucking company from a single leased flatbed into a fleet of 43 vehicles by the time I was in middle school. He wasn't flashy about it. He drove a 10-year-old pickup until the transmission gave out, wore the same style of work boots for 30 years, and believed that money was only worth something if it was moving. He talked about compound interest at the dinner table. He kept a whiteboard in his home office with goals written in red marker. He was serious and exacting, and I adored him. My mother, Diane, ran the social side of things. She organized the church fundraisers, knew every family in our neighborhood by name and medical history, and had a particular gift for saying something cruel in a tone so warm you didn't feel it until later. She told me once, when I was 15 and had just won a regional debate competition, that it was wonderful, but I should be careful not to seem too aggressive. Men didn't like women who argued for sport. She smiled when she said it. Then there was my brother, Marcus, 3 years older than me, and from the day he got his driver's license, he treated the world like it owed him the right of way. He had my father's confidence without my father's discipline. My mother saw him as the continuation of something she'd always wanted, a son who would carry the name forward and make the decisions and handle the legacy. She didn't say that out loud. She didn't have to. Marcus went to University of Tennessee on a partial academic scholarship that my father quietly supplemented. He studied business administration. He interned at my father's company every summer. By the time he graduated, he had a title waiting for him, operations director. My father built him a ramp, and Marcus walked straight up it and acted like he'd climbed a mountain. I loved school, but I loved numbers differently than Marcus did. Where he saw business as power, I saw it as a puzzle. I majored in accounting at Tennessee Tech, graduated early, sat for my CPA exam 6 months later. I wanted to work in forensic accounting, tracking where money went and why. My father thought that was interesting. My mother thought it was an odd choice for a young woman who could just come work for the family company. I didn't. I took a job at a mid-sized firm in Nashville. Audit and compliance work, mostly. Unglamorous, methodical, exactly what I wanted. I shared an apartment with a coworker named Jess, and we split the cable bill and took turns buying coffee creamer, and it was fine. It was genuinely fine. I had no debt except a small car payment. I saved 40% of every paycheck. I kept a spreadsheet the way other people kept journals. My father got sick when I was 26. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer, which is not the kind of diagnosis that gives you time to argue about what you should have done differently. He declined fast. I drove to Knoxville every other weekend. Marcus was already there, already installed in the guest room, already in my father's office going through files. Dad died 8 months after the diagnosis. I sat with him the last night. Marcus had gone to get food and never came back in time. My mother was asleep in the chair by the window. It was just me and him and the sound of machines, and he squeezed my hand once, and I told him I had it handled. I don't know if I believed that then. I do now. The will was read 3 weeks later. My father had been precise about it, the way he was precise about everything. The company went to Marcus, which surprised no one. The house went to my mother for her lifetime, then to be sold and split equally. And then there was a separate personal investment account, something my father had built quietly over 20 years, index funds, dividend stocks, a few real estate investment trusts. He'd left it to me directly, with a letter that said simply that he believed I would know what to do with it and that he was sorry he hadn't said that out loud more often. The account was worth just over $1.2 million. Marcus found out. I don't know exactly how, whether my mother told him or he saw documents he wasn't supposed to see, but he found out within the week. He called me on a Tuesday night and the conversation started casual, almost friendly, and then turned in a way I recognized from childhood. Sideways, he asked if I thought about reinvesting the inheritance through the company's financial partner. Said he could connect me with their guy, get me better returns than whatever I had. I told him I had a plan. He pushed a little. I said goodnight. I didn't hear from either of them for 4 months. Then the envelope arrived. I called my attorney the same afternoon. Her name was Beverly Okafor, and I'd hired her 2 years earlier to handle a contract dispute with a client who owed my consulting firm money. She was thorough, direct, and had exactly 0 patience for games. When I read her the first page of the petition over the phone, she was quiet for a moment and then said, "Come in tomorrow morning, bring everything." I drove to Nashville with a box of organized files. Bank statements going back 6 years, tax returns, my registered LLC for the consulting work I'd started on the side of my day job, client invoices, the investment account statements. Beverly spread it all across her conference table and didn't say anything for a while. Then she looked up and asked one question. "Have they asked you for money before, directly or indirectly?" I told her about Marcus's call, the offer to connect me with the company's financial guy. She wrote something down. "That's a probe." She tapped her pen once. "Let me look into their situation." She called back 5 days later. I was at my desk reviewing a client's quarterly report, and I stepped into the hallway to take it. She didn't warm up to it. "Your brother has a personal guarantee on 3 business loans tied to the company. The company's revenue is down 22% from 2 years ago. There's a lien from a commercial lender filed 6 weeks before this petition. Your mother refinanced the family home in January, which she almost certainly needed his signature to do since it falls under the estate terms." Beverly paused. "This isn't about protecting you. This is about accessing your account before their creditors do." I stood in that hallway for a long moment, just breathing. I'd always known Marcus was careless. I hadn't known he was desperate. We went to work. Beverly contacted my primary client, a regional healthcare group I'd been doing compliance consulting for since the firm was 2 years old. Their CFO, a steady and professional woman named Dr. Elaine Park, provided a letter on official letterhead within 48 hours. 4 years of retained engagement. Consistent, accurate deliverables. Annual contract value in the high 5 figures with renewals pending. The letter described my work in the kind of language that made Beverly smile when she read it. For the isolation claim, I called my closest friend, a woman I'd known since college named Vivienne Cross. Vivienne was an occupational therapist in Nashville. We had dinner at least twice a month, texted daily, and had taken a long weekend trip to Asheville together in the spring. She didn't hesitate when I explained what I needed. She came into Beverly's office the following week, sat down, and described our friendship with the specificity of someone who'd actually lived it. The Asheville trip. The Sunday farmers market we hit whenever schedules lined up. The standing Thursday night phone call that had happened almost every week for 6 years. She signed the affidavit and squeezed my hand on the way out and said, "They're going to look like idiots." I built the timeline myself, evenings at my kitchen table, pulling documents from the locked cabinet I kept in my home office. Every lease payment on time. Every tax filing clean. The LLC registration. The consulting contracts. The real estate transaction I completed the previous year, a two-bedroom condo in East Nashville that I bought outright with a combination of savings and proceeds from the investment account. Beverly advised me to keep the property value out of the documents we disclosed early. Same with the updated account balance, which had grown considerably since the inheritance, because I had not spent it like someone who didn't know what she was doing. Beverly filed our response and subpoenaed financial records from the company and from Marcus personally. What came back confirmed everything. 3 outstanding business loans with personal guarantees in Marcus's name, a demand letter from a commercial creditor, Marcus's personal credit cards maxed in months that lined up directly with downturns in the company's revenue, the refinance on my mother's house, a pattern of financial decisions made by someone running from something. She also found an email my father had sent Marcus 3 years before his death, flagged during the estate correspondence review, where my father warned him that the company's growth depended on discipline and that he was concerned Marcus was treating the operating account like a personal fund. Marcus had never replied. Beverly read it to me over the phone. I didn't say anything for a second. Then I said, "Let's use it." She told me what to expect from their side. My mother would be emotional and calculated at the same time. She was good at that. Marcus would be confident because he'd never actually faced consequences in a room where he couldn't charm his way out. Their attorney, she'd looked him up, was fine, but not exceptional. He specialized in family law but hadn't handled many contested guardianship cases. Beverly had handled 11. She told me to dress simply. "Don't perform competence," she said. "Just be it. Let the documents do the talking." I didn't sleep well the night before. I lay in the condo listening to the neighborhood settle, the distant sound of traffic on the interstate, a dog somewhere down the street. Old memories had a way of surfacing in the dark. My mother's voice at the kitchen table when I was maybe 12, telling Marcus that he had a gift for leadership, and then turning to me and saying, "You're so detail-oriented, Serena, that'll be useful somewhere." Like usefulness was a consolation prize, like detail-oriented was the nicest thing she could find. I got up at 5 and made coffee and sat at my desk and looked at my files until it was time to go. The courthouse in Knoxville was older, stone exterior, high ceilings inside, the kind of building that makes your footsteps loud. Beverly met me at the entrance and walked in beside me without making a fuss of it. The hearing room was smaller than I'd expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, 2 tables facing the judge's bench. Marcus was already seated at the petitioner's table with their attorney, a man in a gray suit who kept straightening his notepad. My mother sat beside Marcus in a dark blazer, hair done carefully, hands folded. She looked grief-stricken in the way she'd always been able to look grief-stricken, a skill refined over decades of church fundraisers and neighborhood tragedies. The judge was the Honorable David Cho, mid-50s, reading glasses resting on the desk in front of him. He reviewed papers as the room settled unhurried. Their attorney opened. He spoke about family concern. He used that phrase 4 times in the first 3 minutes. He said I had pulled away from the people who cared about me, that I was managing significant assets without guidance, that my father would have wanted his family to be protected. He said the word vulnerable once, and I felt Beverly shift very slightly beside me. My mother took the stand first. Her voice wavered in exactly the right places. She described holidays I hadn't attended, which was true. She described phone calls that went to voicemail, also true. She said she worried about me, that she'd always worried, that a mother never stops worrying. The attorney asked if I had ever allowed her to review my financial situation. She said I refused to discuss it. He nodded like that was damning. My father took the stand next. I caught myself. I mean Marcus. He walked to the stand like he owned the room. He always walked like that. The attorney asked him to describe his concerns, and Marcus leaned slightly forward and said I was living below my means in a way that suggested instability, that I was secretive, that the inheritance our father left me was clearly beyond my ability to manage. He said that last part looking directly at me, and his expression said what it always said. "See? You're the problem. You've always been the problem." Beverly cross-examined him without raising her voice. She asked him to describe my financial situation in specific terms. He couldn't. She asked if he had ever reviewed my tax returns. He said no. She asked if he had ever visited my home or workplace. He said we weren't in contact. She asked how he had formed his opinion that my assets were being mismanaged, given that he had no access to any of my financial records. He said it was based on family knowledge. Beverly said, "Thank you," and sat down. She called Dr. Park remotely. The screen on the courtroom monitor showed Dr. Park at her office desk, professional and unhurried. She described our working relationship, 4 years, consistent engagement, accurate and detailed deliverables, a compliance record that her legal team had specifically cited as exceptional. She said I was one of the most reliable independent contractors her organization had worked with. She said that without being asked to say it. Vivian took the stand in person. She was calm and specific in the way that people who work in healthcare tend to be. She described the Asheville trip, dates included, lodging we'd shared, the hike we'd done on the second day. She described the Thursday calls, the dinners. She produced printed phone records showing the frequency of our contact over the past 3 years. She said I had a full, connected life, and that she would personally vouch for my stability without hesitation. Their attorney tried to suggest Vivian was biased as my friend. Vivian looked at him pleasantly and said that was the point of a character witness. Judge Cho made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Then Beverly stood and asked the bailiff to read the independently verified asset summary into the record. The room went quiet in that particular way. Rooms go quiet when they sense something is about to shift. The bailiff was a heavy-set man with a steady voice. He cleared his throat and began reading. Primary residence, condominium, East Nashville, Tennessee. Fully purchased, no mortgage. Appraised value, $480,000. I heard my mother exhale slowly across the room. Investment portfolio, inherited and independently grown over 2 years. Current value, $1,840,000. Marcus went very still. Consulting LLC, registered in Tennessee, active contracts with 3 retained clients. Annual revenue, $94,000. No outstanding debts or liabilities. The bailiff paused for half a second. Total verified net assets, approximately $2.4 million, acquired and managed independently. The room didn't erupt. It went very, very quiet. And then Marcus stood up. He didn't plan it. I could tell by the way he moved, abrupt, off balance, like a car that's lost traction on ice. He pointed at me across the room, his face going red in patches the way it always had since we were kids. "You hid all of this." His voice came out too loud for the space. "You sat there and let us look like fools. That money should have stayed in the family. Dad would have wanted us taken care of, not just you." My mother put her hand on his arm. He shook it off. He said, "That condo is practically paid for by the inheritance. We deserve a share. Dad built that money for all of us." Judge Cho's gavel came down once, sharp. "Mr. Voss, sit down." Marcus didn't sit down immediately. He stood there another moment, breathing hard, still pointing, his attorney pulling at his sleeve in a way that made the whole thing worse rather than better. A court officer stepped forward. Marcus sat. The judge looked at the room over his glasses. He let the silence hold for a moment. Then he ruled. "The petition is denied, dismissed with prejudice." He set his pen down. "This court does not exist to serve as a financial recovery mechanism for petitioners with liquidity problems." He looked at Marcus and then at my mother, unhurried. "The respondent has demonstrated, through documentation, professional testimony, and personal history, a consistent and sophisticated management of her financial affairs. The petitioners have demonstrated the opposite, a pattern of overextension, debt accumulation, and, this morning, an outburst in open court that confirms what the financial records already suggest." He paused. "The court will refer this matter for investigation into potential abuse of the guardianship filing process. The petitioners will reimburse the respondent's legal fees in full. I am also directing the court clerk to flag this case for any future filings involving either petitioner's capacity claims." He closed the folder in front of him and looked at the room one more time. There are people who genuinely need the protections this process provides. Filing in bad faith undermines those protections. I hope that is understood. He left the bench. Beverly touched my arm once. "That's it," she said quietly. "Let's go." I walked out of that courthouse into a cold October afternoon. The sky was flat and gray, and the trees along the street had gone mostly bare. I sat in my car for a few minutes before starting the engine, not crying, just breathing, just letting the stillness settle. I called Vivienne on the drive home. She listened to the whole thing, and when I finished, she said, "I need you to know I would have driven up there and said all of that even if we hadn't been friends since sophomore year, because every word of it was true." I didn't say anything for a second. Then I said, "I know." Beverly called that evening. The referral would move to the Tennessee Board of Professional Responsibility, given Marcus's use of his role as operations director and estate co-administrator to access information used in the filing. The company's creditors, now alerted through public filings connected to the case, had accelerated their timelines. The commercial lender filed a formal demand the following week. I didn't read the local news coverage, but Vivienne texted me a headline, something about a guardianship petition backfiring, and I told her I appreciated it, but I was going to let that sit unread. The silence from my family was absolute. No calls, no texts, not from Marcus, not from my Millie. The silence felt different from the distance I'd kept for years. This was the silence of people who had shown exactly what they were and had nothing left to say. Marcus resigned from the company 3 weeks later. The board, which included 2 of my father's original partners who still held minority stakes, voted to restructure management and bring in an outside operations consultant. The company my father built didn't collapse, which I was quietly glad about, but the version Marcus had been running it as was over. My mother sold the family home the following spring, not because of the legal sanctions, but because she couldn't cover the refinanced mortgage on her own. She moved into a smaller house in a different part of Knoxville. I know this because Vivienne's mother still lives in the neighborhood and mentioned it in passing. I didn't ask for more detail. I didn't reach out. I blocked their numbers. Not with anger, exactly. More with the same precision I applied to everything else. Some accounts you close because they're not performing and they're never going to. You close them cleanly and you don't reopen them. That winter, I left my salaried position at the firm and took the consulting business full-time. I hired a part-time project manager, a sharp and organized woman named Audra who had been freelancing in compliance work and was ready to stop managing it alone. Together, we brought in 2 new retained clients before spring, both mid-sized healthcare organizations looking for ongoing audit support. The work was interesting and it was mine, and no one could petition a court to take it from me. I still have the condo in East Nashville. I added blackout curtains to the bedroom and repainted the kitchen a color called Aegean teal that I spent 3 weeks deciding on and have never once regretted. I have a small balcony where I drink my coffee in the morning when the weather allows it, which in Nashville is more often than people expect. Vivienne and I still do the Thursday calls. We added a standing Saturday morning walk along the Greenway when she moved a little closer to my neighborhood. We talk about our clients, our families, the things we're building, the things we've let go. It's the kind of friendship that doesn't announce itself loudly. It just shows up, week after week, steady and without conditions. My father's whiteboard is in my home office now. I kept it after the estate was settled. His goals are still written on it in red marker, half erased, partly illegible. I've never written over them. I'm not sure I will. It feels right to let them stay there, a record of a man who believed that what you built with discipline was yours in a way that nothing else could be. He was right about that. I don't need to prove it to anyone anymore. The court proved it once. But honestly, I already knew. I knew it the same way I knew the morning I signed the papers on the condo, standing in an empty kitchen that smelled like fresh paint, looking out a window at a street that was mine to come home to. That's the thing no one tells you about building a life quietly. The silence isn't loneliness. It's just yours. And when someone tries to take it and they hand you back the receipts in a courtroom and a judge looks them in the eye and says, "No, not today, not ever," that silence becomes something else entirely. It becomes proof. I've thought a lot about what Marcus actually believed when he stood up in that courtroom. I don't think he was performing. I think he genuinely expected to win, and that's the part that stayed with me longer than anything the judge said, longer than the referral, longer than the bankruptcy filing that came later. He expected to win because for his entire life he had, not because he was smarter or more capable. but because no one had ever made him account for the gap between what he projected and what was actually true. That's not luck running out. That's cause and effect, slow and inevitable, the way it always is. My father used to say that discipline was just delayed reward. He said it plainly, without drama, the way he said most things. I didn't fully understand it at 22. I understood it completely, sitting at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning, organizing bank statements into labeled folders, building a case out of a decade of quiet, unglamorous choices. Every invoice filed on time, every tax return clean, every dollar tracked, not because I was afraid, but because I respected what the work had cost me to earn. Marcus spent those same years doing the opposite. Not dramatically, not all at once, but in the accumulation of small decisions that assume the bill will never come. The personal guarantee on a loan he couldn't service. The credit card charges in months the revenue was already slipping. The refinance he needed my mother to sign because the numbers alone wouldn't hold. None of it was a single catastrophic mistake. It was the arithmetic of someone who believed that confidence was a substitute for competence. It isn't. It never was. And Beverly, I think about her a lot too. The way she listened without performing sympathy. The way she asked one sharp question and wrote down the answer and moved forward. She didn't treat me like a victim. She treated me like someone with a problem that had a solution, and she worked the problem. That's its own kind of integrity, showing up with skill and doing the thing correctly without needing the situation to be more dramatic than it is. Vivienne just showed up, that's all. She showed up with phone records and specific dates and the kind of calm that comes from knowing the truth and not being afraid of it. I learned something from watching her on that stand. Honesty doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be precise. I think what this whole thing taught me, if I'm being direct about it, is that integrity isn't just a moral quality. It's structural. It holds weight. When Marcus's attorney tried to paint me as isolated and reckless, there was a decade of documented reality sitting in a folder ready to say otherwise. You can't fake that in a courtroom. You can't perform your way out of the actual record of what you did with your time and your money and your relationships. The choices I made in my 20s, the ones that felt lonely and unglamorous and occasionally embarrassing when friends were spending freely and I was eating leftovers to hit a savings target, those choices became the foundation that nothing could move. Marcus brought lawyers. He brought his mother and her practiced grief and his own certainty. He brought a petition thick enough to feel official, and it held nothing because there was nothing true in it. What's true holds. What's built carefully holds. The rest is just noise waiting for a judge to name it.